What's up, everybody? Yep, I am in the belly of the beast. And while I'm here, I'm only here for a couple hours, and I didn't have a choice about it. So I'm going to just take some pictures and get up out of here. But while I'm here, while I'm on the steps, we need to talk about it. What is a court? This is very important. And I have a book called Understanding the Courts. If you don't have it, a court is very simple. A court is the king's palace. A court is a place where justice is supposed to be judicially administered. And then a court is a place where the sovereign sojourns with his regal retinue, where the sovereign person is able to, what they say, sojourn with his regal retinue. He's able to, what we say in the hood, parlay, politic with his gang, or what the Constitution calls a jury of your peers, right? And so that is what a court is, right? Now, here's what is fascinating. There's only two actions that we deal with in our reality. In our reality, we live with a civil action, and then we live with a criminal action, right? So anything that will involve the police or ultimately the court system is a result of two things, right? A criminal action is what we call under common law, right? So a criminal action 100% of the time involves a injured party, somebody who has suffered loss, harm, or damages, and they can make a complaint that you, the individual, has harmed them, right? So that's a common law criminal action, right? And then on the other side of that is a civil action. A civil action is an action by way of everything in society is civil. So it requires your voluntary consent in order for it to be enforced against you, or in order for the courts to have the ability to hear and decide the case, right? So that's what we call jurisdiction, right? So in civil law, all legal dictionaries, all legal definitions communicate this incredibly clear, that all civil actions are the result of Roman law, right? So this is all Rome. This is Rome right here. This is the establishment of Rome, in that they hear and decide cases that involve no injured party as a result of civil law, civil actions, right? So because civil law and Roman law are interchangeable, they're the same thing. That means the same jurisprudence or the same consciousness of law, right? This is very important. And so within civil law, or civil law is the root of it, right? So in civil law or under civil law, you have a multiplicity of different types of law, right? You have commerce, or what they call the law of merchants. You have equity. You have admiralty, and then you have maritime, right? You have contracts. You have commerce. You have equity. You have admiralty, which is the law of the sea, and then maritime, which is the law over insurance policies, right? So now we get to the Constitution. The Constitution is incredibly clear. You don't need Black's Law Dictionary to read the Constitution and to understand what it meant. It is incredibly clear that all you have to read is the Constitution, and you will understand the laws under which this country, not this country, I'm in a separate country called the United States right now, but when I say this country, I mean the 50 states have been established on, right? So what that is the Constitution. It has four main articles, right? You have the first article being Congress and the legislative branch of government. Then you have the second, which is the executive branch of government. And then you have the third, which is the judiciary, right? Within the judiciary, the Constitution gives the Supreme Court, or any court in this country, jurisdiction over two types of criminal actions, right? So before we get into criminal actions, let me communicate very clearly. In civil law, in civil actions, they don't need the feds, the federal government, has jurisdiction over civil actions, right? So remember, the top of the umbrella is civil law, and under that is equity, under that is commerce, under that is admiralty, under that is maritime, right? All of that is commerce, contracts, but on the top of that umbrella is civil law, civil action. So the federal government, the United States Supreme Court, has the power to hear all cases involving Admiralty, involving commerce, involving equity, involving all of those things, right? They don't need your permission. This is what we call a superior court, right? It is a Supreme Court as opposed to an inferior court who doesn't have the power to hear everything. They have the power, they only get power through what they call silent contracts or pleading that is sufficient to give this administrator called a judge permission to hear the case, right? And so in civil actions, the feds have total jurisdiction. It's what they call territorial jurisdiction, or they have jurisdiction in rem or subject matter or in personam, right? They have jurisdiction over civil actions, which are ultimately contracts, which require your voluntary consent in order for it to be enforced upon you, right? Boom. So we got that established. Now, on the other side of that coin is criminal actions, right? Throughout all of the Constitution, there is only 2 criminal actions that the federal or the local or the inferior or the superior have a jurisdiction to hear in this country. All right. So you have a criminal action under a common law, right? So that's what I preach every day. It requires an injured party, somebody who, it's what the Constitution says, a citizen, between a citizen of a state and a citizen of another state, right? Not U.S. citizens. We're talking about citizens of the state, right? So when a citizen of a state wants to make a complaint about a citizen of another state involving injury, harm, or damages, then they have a right to do that. They don't need a contract. All they need is a sovereign to take another sovereign to court, right? That's all they need is a verified complaint. It don't have to be sworn. It can be unsworn. It don't have to be verified. As long as it's a complaint and that person who's making the complaint can be subpoenaed, can go to the stand and take an oath and say, hey, I saw that guy do it, or I experienced that at the result of his actions, right? Boom. So we got the first one out the way. There's only 2, right? So the first one is a common law criminal action. That's what the power of the courts to do. That's what we call common law, right? Somebody just makes a complaint. They have evidence to prove that you were the one that did it. You put your hands on somebody. You took something that didn't belong to you, or you damaged somebody else's property. These people have the authority to hear it. They don't need a contract. They don't need a state ID. They don't need a driver's license. They don't need any of that stuff, right? As long as they got a verified complaint or somebody who can testify that you did it, boom, they don't need your permission, right? Next is the fun part. The next one is what they call a condition of contract of a criminal action under Admiralty and maritime jurisdiction, right? So what people don't tell you is that all Admiralty is international. All of it. All Admiralty. It's called the law of the sea, right? So it says in the Constitution that the United States shall be subject to Admiralty and maritime jurisdiction, and that the courts, who is supposed to be a mediator, is able to hear cases involving Admiralty and maritime jurisdiction, right? Now, here's where they get in trouble, is that because Admiralty, all Admiralty is international, it's all the law of the sea, then that means that you have to have known that it was an international contract in order for it to be a true case that can be judged against you, right? So 2 criminal actions. You have one of them under common law, and then you have the one over what I say every day on these videos, what they write on fake statutes and fake pieces of paper, right? And so that is a condition of a contract, an international contract of a criminal action. It still involves injury. It still involves harm. It still involves loss. It still involves damages. It still involves crime, or the root word of crime is injury, right? And so it still involves those things, but they are not allowed to execute, have a court proceeding or anything like that that involves no full disclosure of an international contract, right? So because all Admiralty contracts are international, they come from the sea, from another country, or from another ship onto another ship, right? They have to have disclosed the full contents of the contract in order for them to hear a case involving crimes under an Admiralty jurisdiction. Okay, so this is very important, because this is what they don't want you to know. They don't want you to admit, they don't want to admit, hey, this is all international, and because it's all international, you didn't know it wasn't international, and also there was no action on your part that could subject you to this international contract we don't want to tell you that so that we still have the power to hear and decide the case, right? So in all actions involving what they call a crime or a criminal action, there's only two types of criminal actions in all of the 50 states. There is one of a common law, the one we all know. You put your hands on somebody, they go tell the police, you're going to jail, right? Easy stuff. If you steal something, they go get the police and they got evidence, a videotape or something, you're going to jail, right? Easily. Now, if they write something on fake pieces of paper and they say, oh, this is a crime as a result of no injured party, and they didn't fully disclose that this was an international contract and that you're actually not a party to the contract because your signature is nowhere on this international contract, well, then they don't have the power to hear and decide a criminal case under an Admiralty jurisdiction, right? And so 90% of the cases that are tried in this country are under Admiralty because there is no valid international contract on which the other party, called the defendant, is actually subjected to, because there was no actual injury involved, right? It was only by contract. It was only by the legislator. It was only by what they write in statutes and codes. It wasn't confirmed by the Constitution. It wasn't written in the state constitution or the federal constitution, and therefore it's international. It's Admiralty, because all civil law is the result of Rome, all of it. So it's all international by default. And then when they get you and coerce us into filling out fake pieces of paper without full disclosure, and they label those things crimes, well, then that can't be a valid case because we are not a party to an international contract, right? So this is very important. Understand there's only two criminal actions, right? Put them in the comments. There's only two. Well, the first one is common law criminal action, right? You put your hands on me, I put my hands on you. Those are crimes, right? That's a real crime. It don't need no permission, don't need no piece of paper, don't need no driver's license. It don't need none of that, right? But the other, which we always experience in this country, is a condition of international contract of a criminal action under Admiralty and maritime jurisdiction. So those are the only two things that mention crimes in the Constitution. So those are the only two that they have the power to hear and decide. And if they're going to use Admiralty, then there has to be proof and evidence that you are a party to the international contract. Otherwise, these people, as mighty and as nice and pretty as this building is, don't have the power to hear or decide a case unless they admit that this is actually Admiralty, and they're not going to do that. So yeah, just wanted to get on here while I'm here and just talk trash about the courts in America, right? So yeah, man, that's it.